Hello and welcome to this special 50th anniversary event. My name is Ryan Brown and I serve as Chief Development Officer with Food for the Hungry. On behalf of FH and those joining us today, I want to thank you for taking the time to participate in this event. Today we'll be celebrating what God has done through this mission of ending poverty over these past 50 years through our staff, those we serve and partner with, and you. We'll also be sharing a crucial dimension of our work, one that began with our founder, Dr. Larry Ward, in supporting those children who are at greatest risk through our Children in Crisis response efforts. Before we share our program overview, I'd like to first introduce you to our CEO and President, Mark Viso. Welcome, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. It's great to be here with you, and thank you for this chance to share a little bit with all of you, but more importantly, to thank you for continuing to partner with us in this mission of ending all forms of human suffering and poverty worldwide. You know, poverty is so pernicious and so devastating that it is truly impossible for us to accomplish what God has called us to do without the faithful and generous support of people like all of you.
That is so true. So as we know, this past year has been significant, especially for our organization reaching an important 50th year anniversary milestone. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, you all have remained faithful and committed as ever, enabling our fields to respond in ways across the globe. Mark, as you've come into Food for the Hungry, what have these 50 years represented to you?
It's a great question. Thanks for the chance to talk a little bit about that. You know, I think it's important to go back to the beginning of why Food for the Hungry began. As you know, Ryan, in 1971, Dr. Larry Ward started this organization and this grand mission, inspired by Psalm 146. And I love that passage where it says, God upholds the cause of the oppressed and gives food to the hungry. You know, in our first decade, we responded to worldwide disasters in Bangladesh, Nicaragua, West Africa, Vietnam, Guatemala, even Romania. And that's why we do what we do, carrying forward the vision from Psalm 146 from our first day in 1971 to today, and hopefully with God's good grace, into the future.
So Mark, how did you get started with Food for the Hungry? Can you share a little bit of your personal journey with FH?
Yeah, it's a funny story. You know, my first time with Food for the Hungry began when I was young, 22-year-old, just out of college, and I went to Ethiopia as a volunteer with Food for the Hungry to support their work in responding to the 1986 famine. At the time, I thought I wanted to be a diplomat. But once I got there and I saw the devastation that poverty and marginalization causes on children and families and communities, I realized that I needed to contribute whatever gifts and talents God had entrusted me with to try to make a difference. Also being there, I saw that when we do contribute, it does make a difference. And so ever since then, back in '86, I've taken as my guiding principle the verse, much like Larry Ward had Psalm 146, for me, Job 5:16, where it says, so that the poor have hope and injustice shuts its mouth.
Mark, in celebrating 50 years, it's not only invaluable to look to the past, but we also need to have a vision for the future. Can you share with our audience where Food for the Hungry is going?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question, Ryan. You know, our mission of ending poverty globally is needed now more than ever. For example, in the Gates Foundation's annual Goalkeepers Report for 2020, it confirms that our previous progress in combating the causes and effects of poverty has in fact stopped. Even more discouraging, we have regressed on most of the 18 Sustainable Development Goals that the entire world committed to, and our shared efforts have been set back 25 years as a result of COVID pandemic. And yet we know and can be encouraged that our efforts do indeed make a difference. Prior to the setback that we're experiencing because of COVID, during the last 50 years, we have made striking improvements. Economic growth and efforts by organizations like Food for the Hungry and supporters like yourselves have enabled many to leave extreme poverty, overcome marginalization and forms of injustice. For example, the number of people who live on more than $10 per day increased by nearly 1 billion people in just the last 10 years, the last decade. And remarkably, just a generation ago, our lifetime, more than half the people living in Ethiopia, Indonesia, India, Ghana, and China, for example, lived in extreme, devastating poverty. But over the last 2 decades, the share living in extreme poverty was reduced by more than 50% in all those countries. We've also seen the reduction of malnutrition rates, particularly in children. This progress is deeply encouraging, it's galvanizing, it's motivating. It prompts us to do more. It proves that our efforts do indeed make a difference. There's hope. Our efforts matter. But these positive trends, unfortunately, are not expected to continue. By 2030, for example, 500 million people are expected to live in extreme poverty once again. In fact, today, almost 1 in every 10 persons currently lives in extreme poverty. So, what does this mean for Food for the Hungry? Well, by God's grace, fortunately, we can celebrate the impact we've had these past 50 years in being a part of truly ending poverty. Since our beginning in 1971, we've worked in over 25 countries in Africa and Eastern Europe, Asia and Latin America. In fact, this year alone, over 14 million people benefited from Food for the Hungry activities that you all supported. We worked in about 2,800 communities and did relief work, responding to the most urgent challenges in nearly 20 different countries, impacting more than 2 million people, making their lives better. Yet we know that our world is ever more fragile as a result of COVID-19. We face new and unfamiliar challenges ahead of us. But we know that our shared efforts make a difference. So Food for the Hungry's future will be, as it has been in the past, firmly rooted in seeking, making, and always keeping the right promises in partnership with people like you all over the world.
Thank you, Mark, for joining us today and for your leadership of Food for the Hungry.
Thank you for the chance to talk with you, Ryan, and thank you all again for partnering with us in this important mission to end all forms of human suffering worldwide and to answer God's call to bring His kingdom present here on earth.
We're so grateful for your partnership as together we respond, serve, and support those most impacted by extreme poverty. Together, we've seen God's faithfulness as children, families, and communities worldwide have experienced hope and transformation these past 50 years. As I mentioned earlier, you'll have the opportunity to hear more about our work and the impact it's having on the lives of children who are experiencing challenging circumstances. You will also be hearing from people like you who have been part of this mission of ending poverty, making a difference around the world. But before we dive into our program, we have a special treat for you. Leading us today in worship to celebrate all God has done over these past 5 decades is artist Matt Maher.
What holds your heart, what stirs your soul, what matters come to mind. The cares you keep, the thoughts you think, it's not all wasted time. Seeking you will find. Joy still comes in the morning, hope still walks where the hurting. If you're still alive and breathing, praise the Lord. Don't stop dancing and dreaming, still good news worth repeating. So lift your head and keep singing, praise the Lord. The years go by, we wonder why we lost our way from home. Our Father finds the child inside we left for growing old. Awake, 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 my soul. Joy still comes in the morning, hope still walks with the hurting. If you're still alive and breathing, praise the Lord. Don't stop dancing and dreaming, still good news worth repeating. So lift your head and keep singing, praise the Lord. All right, I'll try something. I can't hear you, so this is a buddy system. I want to teach you something. You sing it with me, all right? It goes like this. Let everything praise the Lord. You sing that. Let everything praise the Lord. Keep singing. Let everything, the working, in the waiting, let it praise the Lord. In the blessing, in the breaking, come on, praise the Lord. In the dying, the rising, let it praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Joy still comes in the morning. Hope still walks where the hurting, and you're still alive and breathing. Praise the Lord. Don't stop dancing and dreaming. There's still good news worth repeating. So lift your head and keep singing. Praise the Lord. God is for you. And many times we find ourselves in a constant struggle. Life sometimes feels like a constant struggle. And in the Old Testament, the Israelites would find themselves faced with battles that they could never win. And over again, there would be these moments where God would just display his power, his faithfulness. And I love this passage where he says, I myself will fight for you. You need only be still. That's what this song's about. You are my joy. You are my song. You are the well, the one I'm drawing from. You are my refuge, my whole life long. Where else would I go? Surely my God is the strength of my soul. Your love defends me. Your love defends me. And when I feel like I'm all alone, your love defends me. Your love defends me. Yeah, yeah. Day after day, night after night, I will remember you're with me in this fight. Although the battle, it rages on, the war is already won. I know the war is already won. Surely my God is the strength of my soul. Your love defends me. Your love defends me. And when I feel like I'm all alone, your love defends me. Your love defends me. You're singing hallelujah. You're my portion, my salvation. Hallelujah. Surely my God is the strength of my soul. Your love defends me. Your love defends me. And when I feel like I'm all alone, your love defends me. Your love defends me. Surely my God is the strength of my soul. Your love defends me. Your love defends me. And when I feel like I'm all alone, your love defends me. Your love defends me.
Hello, my name is Jeannie Dassow, and I've been a board member since 2009. And I have really enjoyed my time with Food for the Hungry. The thing that has drawn me to Food for the Hungry is I found that my passion in life matches Food for the Hungry's passion. And I have cared deeply about seeing the lives of women and children around the world improved. And I've been able to watch FH as an organization grow over the past 11 years. It's our practice as a board to seek to understand the organization on a deeper level. And so each year we make a trip to a field, and those visits have been deeply impactful for me as a person. I have several women, especially that I remember around the world. There was one woman who said that FH had been a life connector for her, that she had learned about how to care for her child, and she had been so alone. She was from an Islamic community and realized that her Christian neighbors had hope that she didn't have. And she ended up, through Workers with Food for the Hungry, learning about the gospel, and her heart was full of hope. She was living in a mud hut, and yet joy and contentment exuded from her. And she really loved her little boy, and that was apparent. These stories of transformation around the world are repeated in all of the countries where FH works. And it's been a privilege as a board member to get a glimpse into those and to see the strong local and community-driven work that FH is doing. One of the hallmarks of Christians down through the ages has been that we care for orphans and widows in their distress. And children were in crisis around the world before the pandemic, and it's gotten only worse. We know that in communities that the children, because of their inability to care for themselves and because of just their small size, and often because of their baseline poor health due to the poverty that their communities are suffering from, are extremely vulnerable. And FH has worked with them in situations of crisis. These crises, such as internal migrations and forced migrations and famines and problems with the exacerbated by COVID, have only increased. So the work that FH is doing through humanitarian affairs is become even more central. I can't get out of my mind pictures of the suffering of children. And I know I'm old enough to have experienced the famine in Eritrea in the 1970s and seeing pictures of bloated bellied children and realizing how much I had in comparison. Some of us in the United States have had the privilege of not suffering too much through the COVID pandemic, but that's not the case in other countries. It's certainly not the case in countries where FH serves. And I think the time is now. We've been very fortunate as a ministry that our finances have remained stable through COVID, and we're hoping that we can even grow partnerships. And one of the ways that we want to communicate with donors is to show the impact of our work. And we're working hard as a board to look at metrics and to look at ways that we can improve the work of FH and magnify it going forward. On behalf of the board of Food for the Hungry, I want to take this opportunity to thank our donors. You actually make our work possible. And it's gratifying to go and see the employees in the fields around the world and seeing the integrity of the people that serve with FH. The founder, Larry Ward, famously stated that people suffer one at a time and we can help them one at a time. And that's something that we're deeply grateful for at Food for the Hungry. We know that we could not do our work without donors and without the generosity of people, even generosity that they could choose to give elsewhere. But we're very grateful, and it is our enduring goal to be wise stewards of the money that's given to us.
Thank you, Jeannie. Many of you on this call tonight have been faithful in your giving. When we look at 5 decades of ministry, that equates to 5 decades of generosity with people like you. And here's just one example of partners who I'm honored to introduce. Joining us today is Tom Kecker and Peggy McNeese.
Hi, my name is Peggy McNeese, and I'm really excited today to talk a little bit about Food for the Hungry.
I'm Tom Kecker, and likewise, I'm very excited to be spending some time talking today about Food for the Hungry, an organization that we have a strong connection to and have for many years. Our attraction in introduction to Food for the Hungry is primarily through my professional work in association with the Rotary Club that I was in. We had several different projects we were involved in, one in Peru, and then a second one in Nicaragua, which I actually led a team down to inspect the project and just getting a much deeper involvement with what's involved, how FH goes around developing a community, developing a project, looking at years of work, and particularly just the dignity at which they, and respect at which they treat the constituents of those projects, and just very moving and a very humbling experience for me. So those two projects alone sold me on what FH can do and how they go about doing their work. It's quite uplifting.
I wasn't able to go on the Nicaragua trip, but I have not seen him that excited when he got home talking about what he had seen, and he certainly convinced me that Food for the Hungry was a great organization.
Since that hands-on experience, we've been more engaged, I guess, in just following the reports, the webinars, the different projects that Food for the Hungry will provide in outreach type format. And it's just been very enjoyable to see that they're continuing their mission, and they're continuing it in the same way with, the Christian-based work with these communities. The objective's the same. We're going to lift these people out of poverty, and through that, the leadership that they create in these communities is just astounding.
We all know, if we've read books about Africa, and a lot of the money that has gone to different organizations, where sometimes it doesn't have the desired effect. So Food for the Hungry has a proven track record that we can fully endorse and support.
Since I've retired for about 10 years now, one of the focuses is getting deeper into Scripture, getting deeper into my Christian life. And the call to serve and share the blessings that we've been given is just so loud that finding an outlet to do that, and an organization to team up with in order to do these outreach programs that I think are just required of me as a good Christian, a well-blessed Christian, to do that. Food for the Hungry has been able to make that journey easier, because I've got a trusted partner that I can support with my resources to carry on what I consider to be God's work.
It's nice to have organizations that you can partner with, that you just have the full confidence and faith, again, with the proven track record. So it's when we moved from Alaska down to Washington, it was very important for us. We kind of both each individually developed a list of our charities, and Food for the Hungry has been on that, and we just are delighted to continue to support it.
We decided to invest in children in crisis because it was really a focused effort to address the needs of the most vulnerable in any community, the children, and the children being the future, and understanding that what they learned and what they experienced, particularly from these, from an FH program that is going to be in their community for years, will only serve to build a better leadership effort later on in these children's lives. They're going to reflect on this and they're going to build on this, I believe.
I have a special affinity for kids. I don't care if they're my kids, grandkids, just little ones. I love them. And it just breaks one's heart to see kids that are malnourished, don't have educational resources, all of those kinds of things. And knowing what Food for the Hungry has done, particularly with their work in villages, just speaks to my heart.
Our founder, Dr. Larry Ward, who led, served, and deeply loved Food for the Hungry, has gone on to glory to be with the Lord and to hear those words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Representing Dr. Ward today is his beloved daughter, Sheri Moy. Sheri, we'd love for you to share your father's passion, work, and legacy.
Hello, my name is Sheri Moy, and I have the privilege of being the daughter of the founder of Food for the Hungry, Dr. Larry Ward. I think the story in the beginning of Food for the Hungry actually started a few years before 1971. My father was traveling extensively with World Vision at the time, and I think God began to really impress upon his heart that there were some dark days ahead. There was a famine, there was a world hunger crisis looming. And my dad began to just study the scriptures, which he always did. He read the word faithfully, but he really made a very intentional effort to find out what the word of God said about the hungry and hurting. And so that's what he started to do. And I think it was a combination of things that just began to line up where his focus began to change. His focus became what he would often call just the two hungers, world hunger and spiritual hunger. And that's really how it was birthed. At the time in 1971, there really were no other organizations that were focused on the world hunger problem at the time. And so that's how it was birthed. I think my dad was so driven by such a genuine call by God that it was just who he was. His heart for others was huge. And, there was a quote that he would mention sometimes. I think it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer that had talked about Jesus being a man for the people. And, my dad loved people, and he especially loved children. There was something I think I began to understand the older I got, that I also saw in his heart that what he did was incredibly hard. Going out on the field and facing the things that he faced over and over and over again. But he found such joy in the lives of children. Even in the middle of extreme poverty, he saw joy and he saw hope. And I think that really fueled him and kept him going. But it was a strong call. There's no other way to put it. He couldn't shake it. And it was his reason for being. And he knew that. And his whole heart's desire was to serve God faithfully and serve him well. And that's what he did. He loved people more than anybody I've ever seen in my life. It was the most incredible example. No matter who he met, no matter what their station in life, he saw great value in every single person. And I think that was at the heart of what he did and what the call was just helping them understand the worth and the value that their life had. I think my dad's greatest hope was that each child would understand, first and foremost, that there was a God who loved them and didn't want them to suffer and wanted them to know him personally, but at the same time cared about their physical needs. He cared about their hunger. He cared about their pain, and he cared about their future. We had the opportunity to travel with him quite a bit. And I every time I was just amazed at how he was fueled by the time he spent with kids, no matter where we were, what refugee camp we were in. He found joy. He did funny, silly things with them. He taught them to be great LA Dodgers fans. He would do just hilarious things with them everywhere. And he left a mark on, each one of them, I think that they knew that there was a man who cared, and a man who would be back with hope and with help. When a natural disaster struck, we just knew in our home that within minutes, my dad would be headed to the airport. It was a matter of who's taking him to the airport this time. Because he walked closely with God and listened for God's voice, when God said go, he went without a doubt, without a question. He was such a man of faith, and he saw God faithfully provide that, not that every crisis became easier, but when something happened, without a doubt, God was already working ahead of where he was going. And time after time, the right person would be there to meet him, to take him to exactly the person he needed to be in order for the work to continue or the work to begin or whatever was going to happen. It was such an opportunity, and that's what he saw. It was such an opportunity to be a Christian witness to whether it was government officials or, the people in such extreme need at that moment. He came often first there, just with open hands and willing to just do whatever he could, listening, trying to work with the local churches that were there to enhance their witness and what they were doing. But that was, every one of those situations was heartbreaking, but every one of them that I can think of, and there were so many, were opportunities for God to work and God to act in miraculous ways. My father was absolutely committed to not only meeting the needs of children, but along with each of those children was a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a community that was reaching out for help when a natural disaster struck. And whatever it was, he recognized the need was great, and there would be many, many pieces to put together. But he was also very, very aware, no matter how big that disaster might be, each one of these people were individuals, and they were being impacted individually. And he never, ever lost that true understanding. And I know the phrase was said many, many times, but they die one at a time, so we will help them one at a time. As I reflect back on 50 years, a lot of years of serving, my dad knew from the beginning, the poor we would always have with us, that was just a fact of living on this earth. But we all know that the problem has not diminished, it's not going anywhere. And life has become so much more difficult, more complicated. I know without a doubt that, my dad would be the first out there leading the charge, saying that the needs are greater than ever. It's not going to leave us, but it's an incredible opportunity. Every single time Food for the Hungry steps into a new area to reach people we have not reached before. While 50 years is so incredibly exciting, and I can't help, I just smile because seeing Food for the Hungry begin at the kitchen table, in our home, and now 50 years later to see the impact that Food for the Hungry continues to have, not just continues, but just the opportunities that in the way that Food for the Hungry has just expanded its focus and all that it's doing. It is just such a tremendous blessing. My dad would sometimes say shortly before he passed away that he hoped when he was in heaven he would have the opportunity to at times pull back the curtain and take a peek. And for me, this is one of those moments that I think, I'm hoping he can pull back that curtain and take a peek and see what Food for the Hungry is doing and is poised to continue to do in the time that's ahead. The needs are great, and we serve a great God, and that has not changed.
Thank you, Sheri, for sharing your perspectives and experiences. It's an honor to hear the impact that Dr. Ward's legacy is having, and it continues to this day as we care for the needs of those marginalized and burdened by extreme poverty. As we know, children are the most vulnerable members of society. That's true whether they are living in a community that is thriving or one in crisis. So what does it mean for children and families to experience crisis in those communities that we serve and partner in? And what does our response entail? Take a look.
One of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes in recorded
Futures
history.
uncertain.
Wind up to 200 miles per hour.
Those who were rescued are now in quarantine.
So much devastation.
The refugees fear persecution.
In South Sudan, tip into famine. Mandatory evacuations are already in place.
Life-changing events can tear us apart. Trauma and crisis threaten to break us, globally and individually. But there is hope. At Food for the Hungry, we're committed to responding to the hardest events in the hardest places by serving the most vulnerable. We stay to recover and rebuild in order to help communities thrive and live out God's purpose for their lives. We believe all people should have hope for the future. We focus on investing in children to transform entire communities, and by doing so, lift them out of poverty.
Almost 285,000 new cases.
As COVID-19 devastates and overwhelms communities worldwide, together we are responding to struggling families now and through the aftermath. Let's continue to respond, to be agents of change, by bringing restoration and hope in the hardest times, together.
For those that we serve alongside, a crisis entails the impact of living through a disaster, both natural and man-made. From hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes, and floods to more complex situations like war and mass displacement, the plight of children are the most precarious and long-lasting. Disruption to education, basic nutrition, water, health, and hygiene in the formative years will have lasting, devastating effects on future development and opportunities. For these reasons, the Children in Crisis Fund was created to help facilitate FH's focus on supporting children when disasters impact their lives. We focus on providing emergency shelter, food and nutrition, along with clean water, sanitation, health, and hygiene needs. We're also creating systems to protect children and women in these highly vulnerable situations. Here is a story seen through the eyes of a child of those devastated by crisis and transformed by our partnership.
আয়েরে মেট্রিলি দিকে মানুষ হারে দিয়ে দিকে ভ্যাকিং দিকে আবার হারে হারি বলে ফালায়ে আবার সোয়ার মারিয়ার ফাইছিলে goro madashi mamma nella traia nellige abbarare mamattu Amar hasil zafajim teratuan handi dak lagi. Hatte de tati ten dak lagi. Air manis tanah cari beli ati mana tulen dak lagi.
The Rohingya community, they've experienced deep and profound challenges and trauma leading up to arriving in Bangladesh, and then they get here and the challenges aren't over. In fact, for most of them, the hardest days are still ahead. For the Rohingya community here, many of them have never received medical care before.
Ara sales table we bade ara itarare humid time made itarare sar refal di ara jai itarare ara sales table jai ro hoide jai aro addu to hobe bade itarare ara aro hoidi ki mane thora pani ara ek quarter ditam jai ara ni ashe tani ba to hanhari iba ina hole Viso hoste ite da sa hasher gala bishmika niash bishi pari ki the Highland of Arabian line, the key raffle house, the RFSM medical team. I got a Dakakan doctor Hamasa, Arponutu, Kato, Konoshon, Solo, I and Yahonzari, and Arapukushilagi. The Hona for a Dr. Hanashi, Aladila, Doctor Sayapova, the Davafayi, Davafera, Hayera, Aladila, and the Kira. And like Itaba, Ratrasa, the Dunuki, La Fuana, Burase. Jadun all boy, Clara Gomgori Haji. I want the color Bagumata Marigala, Gomasala, like I love an hour, Donale, Mole, Tole, Evaluation.
As I hear these stories and reflect on our time together today, I am reminded and confronted with the reality that our world is broken. That brokenness began at the very beginning, from our fall in Genesis chapter 3 until now. The consequences of sin have wreaked havoc on our lives in this world. But even in the midst of that devastation, there is hope. There is hope because God Himself has entered into our brokenness. He has entered into our shattered world and is renewing and transforming all things, including extreme poverty. And in ways that I don't know I can even fully understand, and I certainly know we don't deserve, Christ invites us to participate. Scripture says that we actually become His hands and His feet that are entering into the brokenness and bringing hope. It was 50 years ago that Dr. Larry Ward responded to that invitation. And the story of these 50 years has not been one of what FH has accomplished. The story of these past 50 years has been God's story of what He's done in our midst by inviting us into the transformative process together. Fully recognizing that the glory belongs to God, I do want to thank you. Just like Larry Ward and so many people over these past 5 decades have done, you have responded to God's invitation to be His instruments of hope. And for that, I thank you. We're so grateful for your faithfulness as it reflects God's faithfulness over these past 50 years. We know that the God who has been faithful in the past will remain faithful as He leads us forward. As we continue to press forward to this work Christ has invited us to, we wanted to extend an invitation for opportunity as well. Whether on your phone or computer, if you go to the URL on your screen, you can make a gift towards our Children in Crisis Fund. The Children in Crisis Fund, as we shared today, allows us to respond quickly and with great effectiveness to some of the areas of greatest need on our planet. Thank you for your faithful support of this work God is doing and for spending time with us here today. As we draw our time to a close, I want to leave you each with a blessing. It's a blessing that has been shared in the church for thousands of years, a blessing that many of you know well. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face shine upon you. Thank you.